Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, June 22nd, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and a new onslaught of things that have made it difficult for RFK Jr. to have a foreseeable pathway to the November election. Now, recently we found out that RFK Jr. failed to qualify for the CNN national debate that is set to take place in just under 5 days. It's a CNN debate nationally broadcast and one of two presidential debates between President Biden and President Trump, and RFK Jr. just simply will not be there. This comes at a time where his campaign is on complete and total collapse, financially speaking. The super PAC here is making it having a lot of trouble trying to bring in donors. His vice presidential running mate here has had to put $10 million of her own money into the campaign to keep it afloat. And so all of a sudden you're seeing that CNN is not taking him on for the debate. The money's not there. And now a brand new polling update that shows that he is in a much worse position than where he was a month ago. And we talked about this with our head-to-head matchup poll from Fox News that provided interesting commentary about the 2024 presidential election. But what's interesting here is the decline in support for Robert Kennedy Jr. that has been pretty much consistent since November of 2023. Just around 8 months ago, in November, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was at 15% nationwide. That went down to 14% in December, 13% in February, 12% in March, 11% in May, and now 10% today. At this rate, he should be in the low single digits come November. And so while this is in a position where 100%, there are so many other things that are out there that could impact this election, could be impacting his support overall, I do want to say, when you are looking at the 2024 presidential race, the numbers for Biden and Trump have been steadily increasing, even if the margin has shifted very marginally. And so the reason why that matters is because the support is coming from somewhere, and it's coming from third-party voters out there that are saying on one end, I'm voting for RFK Jr. a year ago, that are no longer voting with him today or voting for Jill Stein or Cornel West or whatever it might be. Now, when you look at Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Democratic Party and the Republican Party has practically been on offense for quite some time now. The Trump campaign initially thought RFK Jr. would be only a poison to the Democratic campaign. After all, he initially ran for the Democratic nomination for president. But then things started to change. The Democrats got worried and started to do attacks on him. The entire Kennedy family came out and endorsed Joe Biden for re-election. Even RFK Jr.'s own siblings endorsed President Biden. Then, Republicans started to get worried as well. They started to see that maybe this is something that we should be worried about, and just as we know it, the Trump campaign pretty much acknowledged that RFK Jr. is a threat to his support, to Donald Trump's support, because in the polls that we were seeing, RFK Jr. in some instances was either polling even in terms of the amount of support, polling even from both Biden and Trump, or in some cases, more from the Trump camp than the Biden camp. And so both Democrats and Republicans decided to sort of, in a way, not intentionally, but in a way, team up in this effort to take down RFK Jr. And you found that it was quite effective. Just around a year ago today, on June 22nd, 2023, he had a favorability rating plus 16 nationwide. 43% of Americans had a favorable view of him, and he overall was in a very strong position. Significantly better than President Biden, significantly better than President Trump, and it went to show that RFK Jr., while being, less of a well-known figure nationwide, was still holding out strong amongst those who knew who he was. But then time went on, and Democrats started unleashing their attacks on RFK Jr. Republicans started to do it too, and things got closer and closer and closer, and even just 4 months ago, RFK Jr. was up 8 points nationwide. Even 3 months ago, even 2 months ago, RFK Jr. was still viewed more favorably than unfavorably. But then, in the middle of May, everything flipped. It started to become worse and worse and worse as Trump ramped up his attacks, as Democrats ramped up their attacks, and now today, an unfavorability rating 8.7% more than favorable. And his favorability rating has dropped down from at one point in time at a high of 47% nationwide down to just 34.6%. That is his problem. And it directly translates to the loss in support that we have seen that has been pretty steady. Because since the time we were looking at, November things fluctuated a little bit. And at different points in time were a little bit better, but voters started to become, increasingly more aware of him. And that was the problem. The more that they learned about RFK Jr., the less they actually liked him. And that's why he became someone who was losing considerable support despite being in a much better position just a year ago. It is very, very rare that third-party candidates in an election like this one, where there is so much discontent on both sides of the aisle for who the respective nominees are going to be, that this third-party candidate would be losing support from where they were a year ago. When you look back at the 2016 presidential election, you don't remember that election to be a race where third-party candidates a year out from the race had been super strong. The introduction of people like Evan McMullin came in as a late entrance into the race. The long support that we saw for Gary Johnson came in at a late part of the race. That's because as people started to realize there were other options and they learned more about them, these third-party candidates actually gained support. RFK Jr., on the other hand, simply does not have that effect. And now that he won't be on the debate stage, it leans exactly into what we have seen here from the Biden team about why they decided to propose the debate very early. When Donald Trump came out and said that he was willing to debate Joe Biden anywhere, any place, he meant it. And so the Biden team took that as an opportunity, set everything on their terms. Republicans said, we will no longer go with the Presidential Commission on debates. And that's the thing. That was a whole problem in 2020. They said in 2016 there was bias, and Republicans decided to entirely pull out from the Presidential Commission, which meant Democrats pretty much were going to run these debates on their terms. And the Biden team did exactly that. But if you're wondering why this is the earliest presidential debate we have ever had in U.S. history, they're traditionally in September and October, and there usually are 3, not 2. The Biden team wants 2, and they want one now, and they want one in September, and a VP debate sometime in between. It's a strategy of intentionality to show that this is a Biden and Trump race, and to exit out all the people like RFK Jr., who are now, again, not qualifying for the debate, won't even be up there. It looks like, too, the Kennedy campaign is saying, all of a sudden, this CNN is colluding with Biden and Trump. At the end of the day, he did not meet the required number of electoral votes. In order to win, in order to be on the debate stage, he needed at least 270 electoral votes based on the states he's registered in. In order to be on this debate stage, didn't happen. He needed to poll at 15% nationwide. Very clearly, didn't happen. There were many, many parts where just RFK Jr. and his campaign did not check the boxes, did not meet the requirements in order to be on the debate stage, and you are finding that to be something that is resulting in a very negative, turn of events for the Kennedy campaign. I mean, I even think back to when RFK Jr. was at the Libertarian Convention roughly a month ago, and he just didn't do well. Why didn't he do well? The voters there didn't like him, he wasn't speaking to them, and to many people on both the left and the right, either he's on the wrong side of issue for one thing or the other, and their safer bet, even if they aren't pleased with the two candidates, their safer bet is President Biden or President Trump. Anyways, back to the point here. The Biden team seems to be doing things on purpose. They want to frame this election as a choice between him and Trump, rather than just a referendum on his job performance. Because what we know, again, I talked about this, that Joe Biden isn't doing well when it comes down to national approval ratings. A 39.5% approval. If this was any other president, they would be losing by epic proportions. But because it is President Biden, the voters here like him more than Donald Trump, and that is clear nationally. And it is Donald Trump's unfavorability. It is Donald Trump's unelectability. It is Donald Trump's persona that drags down the Republican Party's chances in 2024. Just so happens to be the only persona that could have made it through that primary system. Regardless, though, the Republicans are far known to not send their best, not send their most electable, and that was a consistent problem in 2018, in 2020, in 2022, and will be and is again in 2024. And Donald Trump might be a perfect example of that. Because President Biden at baseline, based on these metrics alone, taking away what the administration has done, taking away what the Biden campaign has done, just looking at the metrics here, if we were to apply this to any other election, pull in the expertise from the election predictors of 2008 and 2012 and show them an approval rating, even throwing on President Obama 39.5%, it would be a done deal. Mitt Romney would be president. John McCain would be president. That's how these things work, or did work. Because now, even with this, Biden leads nationwide. He's in a stronger position than where he was at a month ago, when his approval rating was marginally higher. In a stronger position than where he was 6 months ago, when his approval rating was higher. This election is not about what we've seen historically, but some things do shine through. And in this instance, it is the fact that RFK Jr., despite the unfavorability of both candidates on both sides of the aisle, he just simply cannot, become this emerging third-party candidate in a way that his campaign really was hoping. He is fading into irrelevance. He is fading further and further and further, and the Biden team is very clear that this is a Trump-Biden election, not a Trump-Biden-Kennedy election. And so that's where this debate comes in. You have 100 million watchers from 2020, 100 million watchers from 2016, 100 more million in 2024 that will look at this and see it is Biden and Trump again and vote accordingly. That's the purpose of this. And it does tremendous damage to the RFK Jr. campaign because voters very much vote on electability. When you take a look at some of these candidates that were supposedly supposed to perform so well in some of these battleground states, supposedly supposed to do so well as third-party candidates, even in some safe states, voters don't like to back candidates that don't win. They see it as wasting their vote and throwing it out, which is why in 2016, despite still somewhat large, and I put large in air quotes here, somewhat large third-party support, still didn't amount to much because it, wasn't enough to make any impact seemingly. At least not enough an impact to say that, had Gary Johnson and Jill Stein been out of the race, that Hillary Clinton would have won the election. That is entirely up in the air, and that is a question about libertarian voters and Green Party voters who have very different bases. Point being here, that's not a perfect science. My takeaway from this, though, is that at most, you are finding the strongest performance for people like Gary Johnson came in random states like New Mexico, where he was governor, 9% of the vote. Evan McMullin in the state of Utah, 21% of the vote. In a state like Vermont, Jill Stein was at 2%. And, some of these more safe Democratic states, sure, the vote there was still stronger than normal, but it was still pretty lackluster. RFK Jr. shares a similar fate. Gary Johnson desperately wanted to be on that debate stage. So did Jill Stein. They wanted to desperately show the American public that there was another option besides Trump, besides Clinton. But it didn't work. While there were some significant amounts of third-party voters here, I genuinely do not think it was enough, at least together, grouping in Stein and Johnson, because maybe it could be different if you take out Jill Stein or you just take out Gary Johnson. Maybe things would look very different than what they were. But together, I think you did find that there were enough disgruntled voters that were willing to vote for them, but not enough to sway the overall election. The third-party impact here was minimal, and it was minimal because voters knew that they simply had no pathway to victory. People want to back the winning candidates. They want to be in this winning coalition, and if the stakes are high enough, which is what the Biden campaign is trying to do now, that the stakes are Trump or Biden in the same way to try to, make it seem Trump is going to be the end of America, the end of elections. That's what Democrats are running on right now, and it's exactly what could win them the election. This is not going to be an election where voters are going out there and just voting simply on candidates alone, right? Looking at Trump on an individual basis, looking at Biden on an individual basis. This is all about comparison. This is entirely about the way that Biden is perceived in comparison to Donald Trump. And it has nothing to do with anybody else, and certainly not Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We will likely see this campaign go through the election, continue on between now and November, and I don't think that should be shocking to too many people. But what I do think that you are going to see is that the Kennedy campaign will soon run out of money to contest certain cases in battleground states, not even just swing states too, but looking at safe states. They may not even get on the ballot if they don't do things correctly, because right now you find that both Republican and Democratic aligned lawyers and groups are suing Robert F. Kennedy Jr., trying to prohibit him from being on the ballot box there, because at the end of the day, you find that this contention often comes to any candidate, regardless of what it is. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr., playing the political game, he comes from a family of Kennedys. I mean, this is something that should be recognized as this is what politics is, and the Kennedy campaign used to be fine. They had enough money to pay the legal fees to combat this. They had enough money to invest time into states and open up field offices and do different types of campaign measures. There are so many different ways that the Kennedy campaign at one point in time in their peak was able to do that they may end up having to drop, which means it looks like they may pull out of some states. They may not be on the ballot in all 50 states. I mean, they don't have the backing of an institutional party, even the Libertarian or Green Party, which has a history of getting on the ballot in battleground states, getting on the ballot in all 50 states. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is an independent who has been abandoned by his family that is now all supporting President Biden, an independent who has lost a considerable portion of respect by the American public, of Democratic support, of Republican support, and is continuously dropping in the national polls. He won't be on the debate stage. He flopped at the convention. His polling numbers are abysmal. His money just simply isn't there. I mean, there are so many different ways we could look at this and say, wait a second, is this really the guy who is supposedly going to come in as this third-party messiah and win the election, and this third-party candidate who could completely usher in a complete destabilization of the two-party system? Because he's not that guy, and he won't be that guy this coming November. And Republicans and Democrats may take a sigh of relief because both parties wanted him out. And they know that right now, at the way that things are going, he may not be officially out, as in dropping out of the presidential race. But in many ways, and in most cases, he will be out. And they will know that. And they will accordingly plan, and they will decide to campaign the way they want to. But ultimately, RFK Jr. no longer poses the same threat that he did at one point, and that's a problem for the Kennedy team. because it means their days are limited as mainstream candidates, and they run the risk of fading off as irrelevant third-party candidates like we have seen in almost every single election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.